The last rays of sunset cast long shadows across the dusty streets of Copper Ridge as Gabriella Winters stared through the small barred window of her underground prison, watching freedom fade away with each passing day. It was 1875, and loving a man from the wrong side of the tracks had cost her everything. Gabriella pressed her fingertips against the rough stone wall of the cellar beneath her father's grand house. 3 weeks had passed since Harold Winters had discovered his only daughter's affair with Joaquin Vega, the Mexican rancher who worked the neighboring property. Her father's rage had been swift and merciless. She was to remain locked away until she came to her senses, and agreed to marry Richard Holcomb, the banker's son whose family connections would secure the Winters' standing in Colorado Territory society. The cellar was damp and cold, furnished only with a small cot, a wooden table, and a chair. Her meals arrived twice daily, delivered by Martha, the housekeeper whose sympathetic glances offered little comfort. Gabriella's once fine dress now hung loosely on her frame, smudged with dirt and tears. "Miss Gabriella," Martha whispered, appearing at the top of the stairs with a tray of food. "Your father is entertaining Mr. Holcomb and his family tonight. He expects you to reconsider by morning." Gabriella turned away from the window. "Tell him my answer remains the same," Martha sighed, setting down the tray. "He's growing impatient, miss. Says if you don't agree soon, he'll send you back east to your aunt in Boston." "Let him," Gabriella replied, though her heart clenched at the thought of being sent even further from Joaquin. "I won't marry a man I don't love." "Love won't keep you warm or fed," Martha cautioned before retreating up the stairs, the lock clicking firmly into place behind her. Alone again, Gabriella picked at the bland stew and hard bread. Her thoughts drifted to Joaquin, his gentle hands, his warm eyes, the way he spoke of building a life together despite the prejudices they faced. Word had reached her through Martha that Joaquin had been run out of town by her father's men, threatened with hanging if he ever returned. Tears slid down her cheeks as night fully descended. The small window now showed only darkness and the occasional distant flicker of lantern light from town. She had nearly resigned herself to another sleepless night when she heard a soft scraping sound from outside the window. Gabriella froze, listening intently. The scraping continued, followed by a hushed whisper. "Hello? Is anyone down there?" The voice was unfamiliar, deep with a slight drawl. Gabriella approached the window cautiously. "Who's there?" she whispered back. A face appeared in the small opening, a man with stubbled cheeks and eyes that caught the moonlight. He wasn't Joaquin, but something in his expression made her step closer rather than retreat. "Name's Dakota Reed," he said quietly. "I'm looking for Joaquin Vega's sweetheart." "That you?" Gabriella's heart leapt. "You know Joaquin? Where is he? Is he safe?" "Easy now," Dakota replied. "He's safe, but not nearby. Your father's men did a number on him before running him off. He's recuperating at my cabin about 30 miles west." "Thank God," Gabriella breathed. "But why are you here?" "Joaquin saved my life last winter when my horse threw me during a blizzard. I owe him." "When he told me about you." Dakota paused, glancing over his shoulder. "Well, no one deserves to be locked up for loving somebody." Gabriella studied the stranger's face. He was handsome in a rugged way, with a strong jaw and kind eyes. His hat was pushed back, revealing sandy brown hair. "You're risking a lot coming here," she said. "My father has men patrolling the property." Dakota gave a half smile. "I've dodged worse than some hired guns." "How long have they kept you down here?" 3 weeks. "My father wants me to marry someone else, someone suitable." "And you refused?" "I love Joaquin," she stated simply. Dakota nodded, respect evident in his expression. "Then we need to get you out of here. Tonight." "How?" "The door is locked from the outside, and this window is too small." "The window's not an option," Dakota agreed. "But that door." He disappeared from view for a moment. "I'll be back after midnight. Be ready." Before she could ask more questions, he was gone, leaving Gabriella with a dangerous spark of hope. She paced the small cellar, alternating between exhilaration and terror. What if Dakota was caught? What if this was some trick arranged by her father to test her loyalty? The hours crept by with excruciating slowness. Gabriella gathered her few possessions, a small locket containing a portrait of her late mother, a worn book of poetry, and the thin shawl that had been her only protection against the cellar's chill. She changed into her sturdiest dress and boots, grateful that her father had at least allowed her to keep her clothing. Midnight came and went. The house above fell silent as the guests departed, and the household retired. Still, Dakota did not appear. Doubt began to gnaw at her resolve. Perhaps he had reconsidered the risk. Perhaps he had been caught. Just as despair threatened to overwhelm her, Gabriella heard footsteps on the cellar stairs, lighter than Martha's, more cautious. The lock rattled softly, then clicked open. Dakota stood in the doorway, a finger to his lips. He wore dark clothing, a gun belt at his hip, and carried a second pistol which he offered to her, handle first. "Ever fired one of these?" he whispered. Gabriella shook her head. "Let's hope you won't need to," he said, tucking it back into his belt. "Stay close. Your father's asleep, but there's a guard at the front gate and another circling the property." "How did you get in?" she asked, following him up the stairs. "Service entrance. Your housekeeper left it unlocked." At Gabriella's surprised look, he added, "Not everyone agrees with keeping a woman prisoner in her own home." They crept through the kitchen and out the back door into the cool night air. Dakota led her along the shadows of the house, pausing at each corner to check for guards. The stables loomed ahead, dark and silent. "2 horses," Dakota explained as they slipped inside. "Less conspicuous than a wagon, faster too." He moved with practiced efficiency, saddling a chestnut mare and a black gelding. Gabriella recognized the mare as her own, Willow. "You knew which horse was mine?" she asked. Dakota smiled. "Joaquin told me. Said she was gentle but swift. Can you ride astride?" "Yes," Gabriella answered, glad for once of her unconventional upbringing on the frontier. Her mother, before her death 5 years prior, had insisted that Gabriella learn to ride properly, not side saddle like Eastern ladies. Dakota helped her mount, then handed her a bundle. "Food and water. Put this on too." He passed her a worn leather jacket, far too big for her frame. "Whose is this?" "Mine. Nights get cold in the mountains, and we've got a long ride ahead." Before she could thank him, a shout rang out from the direction of the house. "Someone's in the stables. Check it out, Jim." Dakota swore under his breath. "Change of plans? We ride now, hard and fast. Stay with me." He swung into his saddle and kicked the stable doors open. Gabriella followed, her heart pounding as they galloped into the night. Behind them, shouts and the crack of a rifle shot split the air. "Head for the tree line," Dakota called, veering toward the dense forest that bordered the Winters property. Gabriella bent low over Willow's neck, urging the mare forward. The wind whipped tears from her eyes as they raced across the open ground. Another shot rang out, closer this time. They reached the trees just as mounted pursuers emerged from the stables. Dakota led them along a narrow trail, branches slapping at their faces as they rode deeper into the forest. The sounds of pursuit grew fainter as they navigated the increasingly difficult terrain. After what seemed like hours, Dakota finally slowed their pace. They had reached a small clearing beside a bubbling creek. Both horses were lathered with sweat, sides heaving. "We'll rest here briefly," Dakota said, dismounting. "Give the horses a chance to catch their breath." Gabriella slid from her saddle on shaky legs. The reality of what she had done escaping her father's house, fleeing with a stranger, suddenly hit her full force. She sank to the ground, overwhelmed. Dakota knelt beside her, offering a canteen. "Small sips," he advised. "We're not out of danger yet." "How far to Joaquin?" she asked after drinking. 2 days' ride at a steady pace. "One if we push hard, but that would kill the horses." He glanced at the sky, calculating. "We'll head northwest, stay off the main trails. Your father will have men watching the roads. Why are you helping me? Gabriella asked suddenly. Truly. A debt to Joaquin doesn't explain risking your life for a woman you've never met. Dakota was silent for a long moment, his face half hidden in shadow. Let's just say I understand what it's like to be kept from someone you love because others think it's wrong. There was a story there, Gabriella sensed, but Dakota's tone discouraged further questions. Instead, she asked, What will happen when we reach Joaquin? That's for you two to decide, Dakota replied. My cabin's remote, good hunting, decent grazing for horses. You could stay a while, figure things out. Or move on, maybe to California or up to Oregon Territory where folks might be less concerned about a Mexican man and a white woman. And what about you? Dakota smiled faintly. I'll be fine. Always am. They rested for another quarter hour before mounting up again. Dakota set a steady pace through the forest, occasionally doubling back or crossing streams to confuse their trail. As dawn broke, they emerged onto a ridge overlooking a vast expanse of wilderness. We'll stop at a trapper's cabin I know about 10 miles ahead, Dakota said. Rest during the day, travel again at night. Gabriella nodded, exhaustion weighing on her. She had barely slept in the cellar, and the night's events had drained what little energy she possessed. Only thoughts of Joaquin kept her upright in the saddle. The trapper's cabin was crude but secure, built against a rocky outcropping that sheltered it from view. Dakota explained that its owner, an old mountain man named Ezekiel, only used it during fur season. He won't mind us borrowing it, Dakota assured her as he unsaddled the horses and led them to a small corral hidden among the trees. Inside, the cabin was spartan: a rough bed, a table with 2 chairs, a stone fireplace. Dakota quickly started a fire and prepared a simple meal of jerky, hardtack, and coffee. Eat, then sleep, he instructed. I'll keep watch. Gabriella wanted to protest that he needed rest too, but her eyelids were already drooping. She barely finished her food before collapsing onto the bed, Dakota's jacket still wrapped around her shoulders. She dreamed of Joaquin, of their first meeting at the summer social when he had delivered horses to her father's ranch, of their secret rendezvous by the creek where they shared their first kiss, of his promises to build her a home where they could live freely together. But in her dream, Joaquin's face kept blurring, sometimes appearing as Dakota's instead. Gabriella woke with a start to find the cabin bathed in late afternoon light. Dakota sat by the window, rifle across his lap, alert despite the hours that had passed. Any sign of pursuit? She asked, voice still thick with sleep. He shook his head. Nothing yet, but they'll be searching. Your father doesn't strike me as the type to give up easily. He's not, she confirmed, sitting up and smoothing her tangled hair. He's used to getting his way in all things. Tell me about him, Dakota said, offering her a cup of fresh coffee. Gabriella wrapped her hands around the warm tin mug. He came west after the war with nothing but ambition and a talent for recognizing opportunity. Built one of the largest cattle operations in the territory, then diversified into mining interests. My mother was the daughter of a Denver merchant, a good match for a rising businessman. And he expects the same from you? A good match? Precisely. Richard Holcomb has banking connections in Chicago and New York. My father sees the marriage as the final step in securing his empire. Dakota's expression darkened. And you're just another asset to be leveraged. In his eyes, yes. She sipped her coffee. He wasn't always so cold. When my mother was alive, there was laughter in our house. After she died from influenza, something in him hardened. Now it's all about wealth and position. And Joaquin threatened that position? Gabriella smiled sadly. A Mexican rancher with more horses than money? In my father's view, Joaquin might as well have been a stray dog eyeing the family silver. But you saw something different in him. I saw a man who treated me as a person, not a possession. Who spoke to me of books and ideas, who listened when I talked of my dreams. She set down her cup. Joaquin has more dignity and kindness in his little finger than Richard Holcomb has in his entire body. Dakota nodded, understanding in his eyes. We should prepare to leave soon. We'll travel through the night again, reach the foothills by morning. As they readied the horses, Gabriella noted how efficiently Dakota moved, how attuned he seemed to the wilderness around them. You're not just a rancher, are you? She asked. He paused in tightening Willow's saddle. What makes you say that? The way you move. The way you tracked our path. The gun you handle like it's part of your arm. Dakota finished with the saddle before answering. I've been many things. Scout for the army during the war. Marshal for a spell in Kansas. Guide for settlers heading west. Bounty hunter when times were lean. And now? Now I keep to myself. Raise a few horses. Hunt. Trap. It's simpler that way. There was a story there too, Gabriella thought, but again, she didn't press. They mounted up as twilight descended, heading northwest into increasingly rugged country. Dakota set a careful pace, mindful of the treacherous terrain and the horses' endurance. They rode in companionable silence for hours, stopping occasionally to rest the horses and share the last of their provisions. As the eastern sky began to lighten, Dakota pointed to a distant line of smoke rising above the trees. My cabin, he said. And Joaquin. Gabriella's heart raced. After weeks of separation, after fearing she might never see him again, Joaquin was within reach. She urged Willow forward, eager to close the final distance. Dakota placed a restraining hand on her reins. Wait. Something's not right. Gabriella followed his gaze and saw what had alarmed him, not one thin line of smoke, but several, too much for a simple cooking fire. Stay here, Dakota ordered, drawing his rifle. If I'm not back in 15 minutes, ride west. Follow the creek until you reach a trading post. Ask for Elias Johnson. He'll help you. Before she could protest, Dakota had disappeared into the trees, moving silently despite his size. Gabriella waited, counting each agonizing minute, torn between obedience and the desperate need to know what had happened. When Dakota didn't return after 20 minutes, fear overcame caution. Gabriella guided Willow carefully through the forest, approaching the cabin from the direction Dakota had taken. The smell of smoke grew stronger, acrid and heavy. She reached the edge of the clearing and gasped. The cabin was a smoldering ruin, its roof collapsed, walls blackened. Several horses lay dead in the corral, and the ground was churned with hoofprints. Dakota? She called softly, scanning the devastation for any sign of movement. Joaquin? A low groan answered her from behind a fallen section of wall. Gabriella dismounted and rushed forward, finding Dakota slumped against a tree stump, blood soaking his left side. They were waiting, he said through gritted teeth. Your father's men must have guessed where we were headed. Joaquin? She asked, dread filling her voice. Dakota's eyes met hers, full of regret. Took him. Left me for dead. Said they were bringing him back to Copper Ridge for a proper trial. Gabriella knew what that meant, a sham proceeding followed by a hanging. Her father would make an example of Joaquin, claiming he had kidnapped her rather than admitting she had fled willingly. How long ago? She demanded, tearing strips from her petticoat to bind Dakota's wound. Hour, maybe less. 6 men, heavily armed. He winced as she tightened the makeshift bandage. Gabriella, you can't go after them. They'll kill you both. I'm not leaving Joaquin to die, she said firmly. And I'm not leaving you here either. Dakota tried to stand but fell back with a groan. Bullets still in there. Can't ride. Gabriella thought quickly. The trading post you mentioned, Elias Johnson's place. How far? 3 miles southwest. But, no arguments. I'm getting you there first, then I'm going after Joaquin. Despite Dakota's protests, Gabriella helped him onto his horse, then mounted Willow. She led them southwest, following Dakota's labored directions until the trading post appeared, a substantial log structure with several outbuildings and a corral filled with horses. Elias Johnson proved to be a grizzled older man with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense manner. He took one look at Dakota's wound and ordered 2 of his men to carry him inside. Figured you'd find trouble eventually, Reed, Johnson grumbled as they laid Dakota on a bed in a back room. Who's the girl? Gabriella Winters, Dakota replied weakly. Harold Winters' daughter. Johnson's eyebrows shot up. The cattle baron? What in tarnation? No time to explain, Gabriella interrupted. My father's men have taken Joaquin Vega. They're heading back to Copper Ridge to hang him. I need a fresh horse and supplies. Johnson looked from Gabriella to Dakota, who nodded despite his pain. Help her, Elias. She's as stubborn as they come. Johnson sighed heavily. I've got a bay gelding, fastest horse in the territory. But going alone is suicide, miss. I'll go with her, came a female voice from the doorway. A woman stood there, tall and lean, dressed in men's clothing with a gun belt strapped to her hip. Her dark hair was cut short, and her face was weathered by sun and wind. Diana, Dakota said, surprise evident in his voice. Didn't know you were back. Got in last night, the woman replied, her eyes never leaving Gabriella. Heard enough to know you're planning something foolish, which means you could use my help. Johnson snorted. 2 women against 6 armed men? That's even worse odds. Diana's smile was dangerous. 4 against 6. Jacob and Tall Bear will come too. She turned to Gabriella. If we leave now and ride hard, we can intercept them before they reach town. Hope surged through Gabriella. You'd do this for strangers? For Dakota, Diana corrected. And for any woman brave enough to defy her father for love. Something in her tone suggested personal experience with such defiance. Go, Dakota urged from the bed. I'll be right behind you once Elias digs this bullet out. Johnson scoffed. You ain't riding nowhere for at least a week, Reed. Gabriella knelt beside Dakota, squeezing his hand. Thank you? For everything. His fingers tightened around hers. Be careful. Your father's men won't hesitate to shoot. Neither will I, Diana interjected, checking her pistol with practiced ease. Let's move. Within 20 minutes, Gabriella found herself riding alongside Diana and 2 men, Jacob, a former Union soldier with a grim expression and steadfast demeanor, and Tall Bear, a Shoshone scout whose tracking skills, Diana assured her, were unmatched. They rode at a punishing pace, following the trail left by Gabriella's father's men. Tall Bear led them along shortcuts and game trails, steadily gaining ground on their quarry. How do you know Dakota? Gabriella asked Diana during a brief stop to water the horses. Diana's expression was guarded. We rode together for the Pinkerton Agency a few years back. Special assignments. She offered no further explanation, but her tone suggested their relationship had been more than professional. And now? Now I work for myself. Tracking, hunting, occasional bounties. Diana studied Gabriella with curious intensity. Dakota risked a lot for you and your man. Must be quite a story. I barely know him, Gabriella admitted. But he's shown me more kindness in 2 days than most people have in a lifetime. That's Dakota, Diana said with a hint of fondness. Always championing lost causes and damsels in distress. I'm not a damsel in distress, Gabriella replied sharply. I'm fighting for the man I love. Diana grinned. Good. We'll need that fire where we're headed. They remounted and continued their pursuit. By late afternoon, Tall Bear raised a hand for silence, then pointed to a column of smoke rising from a clearing ahead. They've stopped to make camp, he said quietly. Overconfident. Don't expect pursuit. Jacob pulled out a spyglass and surveyed the camp. 6 men, like you said? Your man's tied to a tree on the far side. Looks roughed up but alive. Gabriella felt sick at the thought of what Joaquin must have endured. What's the plan? Diana laid out a simple but effective strategy. Jacob would create a diversion from the north while Diana and Tall Bear approached from opposite sides. Gabriella would stay hidden until they had neutralized the threat, then help with Joaquin. What if something goes wrong? Gabriella asked. Diana handed her a small derringer. 2 shots. Use them wisely. As darkness fell, they moved into position. Gabriella watched from behind a fallen log as Jacob set fire to the brush north of the camp. When the men rushed to investigate, Diana and Tall Bear emerged from the shadows, weapons drawn. "Nobody move!" Diana's voice rang out with authority. "Hands where I can see them!" 2 of the men immediately raised their hands. A third reached for his gun and fell with Tall Bear's knife in his chest. The remaining 3 scattered, diving for cover. Gunfire erupted from multiple directions. Gabriella lost sight of Diana and Tall Bear in the chaos. Deciding she couldn't wait any longer, she circled wide around the firefight, staying low and moving toward where Joaquin was bound. She found him conscious but badly beaten, his handsome face swollen, dried blood caking his shirt. His eyes widened when he saw her. "Gabriella? No, you shouldn't be here," he whispered hoarsely. "I'm not leaving without you," she replied, working at the ropes binding his wrists. The knots were tight, and her fingers trembled with urgency. "Behind you!" Joaquin suddenly shouted. Gabriella turned to see one of her father's men standing there, rifle aimed at her heart. "Harold said to bring you back alive," the man growled. "But he didn't specify what condition." "Step away from the Mexican." Gabriella stood slowly, shielding Joaquin with her body. "I won't go back." "Not your choice, miss." The man stepped forward, reaching for her arm. The derringer felt heavy in Gabriella's pocket. In one fluid motion, she drew it and fired. The man staggered backward, clutching his shoulder, his rifle falling to the ground. Before he could recover, Diana appeared behind him, bringing the butt of her pistol down on his head. He crumpled without a sound. "Nice shot," Diana commented, kneeling to finish untying Joaquin. "For a first-timer." "Is it over?" Gabriella asked, her hands shaking from the adrenaline. 3 dead, 3 tied up, Diana confirmed. "Jacob's got a graze on his arm, but otherwise we're intact." Joaquin stood unsteadily, leaning against the tree for support. Gabriella rushed to embrace him, mindful of his injuries but desperate for the reassurance of his touch. "Mi corazón," he murmured against her hair. "I thought I had lost you forever." "Never," she promised, tears streaming down her face. "I would have searched the world for you." Diana cleared her throat. "Touching reunion, but we need to move. Those 3 we've captured won't stay tied up forever, and we don't want to be here when they break free." They helped Joaquin onto a horse taken from the captured men, and their small party rode through the night. Joaquin was too weak for lengthy conversation, but he kept Gabriella's hand clasped in his whenever they stopped to rest. By dawn, they had reached Johnson's trading post. Dakota was awake, pale but alert, his side heavily bandaged. His face lit up when he saw Gabriella and Joaquin, then softened further at the sight of Diana. "Successful rescue mission, I see," he said, attempting to sit up straighter. "Lie still, you fool," Diana ordered, though her tone lacked real anger. "That bullet nearly killed you." Over the next 3 days, both men recovered their strength while Gabriella, Diana, and Johnson plotted their next move. Harold Winters would not stop searching for his daughter, and now he had even more reason to want Joaquin dead. "California," Johnson suggested. "Fresh start, far from Colorado territory." "Too obvious," Diana countered. "Winters has connections there. I say head north to Montana or Wyoming. Less settled, easier to disappear." Dakota, who had been silent during these discussions, finally spoke up. "I have a better idea. My brother's ranch in New Mexico territory. Large operation, always needs good hands, especially someone who knows horses like Joaquin. Remote enough to be safe, established enough to offer protection." "Your brother?" Gabriella asked, surprised. Dakota had never mentioned family. "Daniel Reed. Former Union officer, now runs one of the biggest spreads in the territory. We don't always see eye to eye, but he's a good man. He'd help you both for my sake." Joaquin, who had been listening carefully, nodded. New Mexico has many Mexican families. We would not stand out so much there. The decision was made. As soon as the men were strong enough to travel, they would head south. Johnson arranged for a wagon and supplies, while Diana scouted the routes to ensure they wouldn't encounter any of Winters' men. On the evening before their departure, Gabriella found Dakota sitting alone on the trading post's porch, staring at the sunset. "May I join you?" she asked. He nodded, shifting to make room on the bench. They sat in companionable silence for a few minutes before Gabriella spoke again. "I never properly thanked you. For rescuing me. For reuniting me with Joaquin. For risking your life." Dakota shrugged, uncomfortable with her gratitude. "Anyone would have done the same." "No," Gabriella said firmly. "Most people would have looked the other way. Why didn't you?" Dakota was quiet for so long that Gabriella thought he might not answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was low, tinged with old pain. 10 years ago, I loved someone I wasn't supposed to love. Ruth was the daughter of a prominent judge in Kansas City. I was a former scout with no prospects and a reputation for trouble. Her father had her committed to an asylum rather than let her run away with me." Gabriella gasped softly. "How awful." "By the time I found out where she was, it was too late. The treatments they used." Dakota's jaw tightened. "She didn't recognize me when I finally got to her. Didn't recognize anyone. She died in that place 3 years later." "I'm so sorry," Gabriella whispered. "When Joaquin told me about you, locked away for loving him, I couldn't stand by and do nothing. Not again." Impulsively, Gabriella took his hand. "Ruth would be proud of what you did for us." A sad smile crossed Dakota's face. "Maybe so." He squeezed her hand once before releasing it. "You and Joaquin deserve your chance at happiness. Don't waste it." The next morning, they set out for New Mexico. Dakota insisted on accompanying them despite his injury, saying he was overdue for a visit with his brother anyway. Diana, to everyone's surprise, also decided to join the party. "Someone has to keep this fool from reopening his wound," she said, nodding toward Dakota, though Gabriella suspected her reasons went deeper. The journey south was arduous but uneventful. They traveled mostly at night and rested during the day, avoiding towns and main roads. Joaquin regained his strength gradually, and by the time they crossed into New Mexico territory, he was able to ride for extended periods without pain. Dakota's brother's ranch, the Double R, sprawled across a valley flanked by mountains. Hundreds of cattle grazed on the lush grasslands, and a substantial main house stood surrounded by barns, corrals, and bunkhouses. Daniel Reed proved to be the physical opposite of his younger brother, shorter, broader, with a full beard and a booming laugh. He welcomed them with immediate hospitality, particularly after hearing their story. "Any enemy of Harold Winters is a friend of mine," he declared. "That snake tried to undercut my cattle prices last year at the Denver stockyards." True to Dakota's word, Daniel offered Joaquin a position managing the ranch's horse breeding program, with quarters for him and Gabriella in a small but comfortable cabin near the main house. For the first time since her escape, Gabriella began to feel secure. A week after their arrival, as they sat on the cabin's porch watching the sunset, Joaquin took her hands in his. "Gabriella, these past months have been..." He shook his head, searching for words. "I have nothing to offer you but my heart and my hands. They are yours if you want them." Tears welled in Gabriella's eyes. "They're all I've ever wanted." They were married the following Sunday in a simple ceremony performed by a traveling preacher. Dakota stood as Joaquin's best man, while Diana, in a rare concession to femininity, wore a dress as Gabriella's maid of honor. As the small gathering celebrated afterward, Dakota approached the newlyweds with a gifted deed to 20 acres on the edge of the Double R property. "Land of your own," he said, handing the paper to Joaquin. "Daniel and I agreed you should have a place that's truly yours, not just employee housing." Gabriella embraced him, too overcome for words. Joaquin shook his hand firmly, emotion evident in his eyes. "We can never repay what you've done for us," Joaquin said. Dakota glanced at Diana, who was deep in conversation with Daniel across the room. Seeing you two happy is payment enough. As the weeks passed, Gabriella and Joaquin settled into their new life. They began planning a house for their land, something modest but with room to grow. Joaquin's skill with horses quickly earned him respect throughout the territory, while Gabriella discovered a talent for bookkeeping that made her invaluable to the ranch's operations. Dakota remained at the Double R longer than expected. His relationship with Diana evolved from prickly companionship to something deeper, though both seemed reluctant to name it. They often rode out together, returning with game or news from neighboring ranches. One evening, as Gabriella and Joaquin hosted dinner in their cabin, Dakota announced he had purchased land adjacent to their property. Building a place of my own, he explained. Time I stopped wondering. Diana studied her plate intently during this announcement. When pressed about her own plans, she merely shrugged and said she hadn't decided yet. Later, as the men stepped outside to check on a disturbance among the horses, Gabriella confronted Diana directly. You love him, don't you? Diana's usual composure faltered. It's complicated. Love always is, Gabriella replied softly. But sometimes it's worth the complication. I've been alone a long time, Diana admitted. Set in my ways. So has Dakota. Maybe that's why you fit so well together. Diana said nothing, but something in her expression shifted, as if Gabriella's words had given voice to thoughts she'd been avoiding. The following month brought unexpected news: a letter from Martha, the housekeeper from the Winters household. She wrote that Harold Winters had suffered a stroke after learning of Gabriella's marriage. He was bedridden but stable, and asking for his daughter. I can't go back, Gabriella told Joaquin that night. Even if it's safe now, I can't face him after everything he did to you. He is still your father, Joaquin replied gently. And he may be dying. Would you come with me? She asked, fear evident in her voice. To the gates of hell itself, he promised. Dakota and Diana insisted on accompanying them, despite Gabriella's protests that they had already done enough. The journey north was tense, each mile bringing them closer to the place that held such painful memories. Copper Ridge had changed little in the months since Gabriella's escape. The Winters mansion stood as imposing as ever on the hill overlooking the town, though it seemed somehow diminished without her father's larger-than-life presence animating it. Martha met them at the door, tears in her eyes as she embraced Gabriella. He's upstairs. The doctor says it's only a matter of time. Harold Winters lay in his massive four-poster bed, his once powerful frame wasted by illness. One side of his face drooped, and his right arm lay useless atop the covers. But his eyes were alert, lighting with recognition when Gabriella entered the room. Father, she said, stopping at the foot of the bed. His left hand moved feebly, beckoning her closer. When she approached, he grasped her fingers with surprising strength. Forgive, he rasped, the words slurred but unmistakable. Gabriella felt tears streaming down her face. I'm trying to. Harold's eyes moved to the doorway, where Joaquin stood watching cautiously. With effort, he extended his hand toward him as well. The gesture, small but significant, broke something open in Gabriella's heart. She had not expected reconciliation, had not even hoped for it. Yet here it was, imperfect and incomplete, but real. They stayed for a week, during which Harold's condition deteriorated rapidly. On his final night, he managed to sign papers that Martha had prepared, documents acknowledging Gabriella's marriage and granting her full inheritance of the Winters estate and business interests. He worked on this for weeks, Martha explained as she presented the notarized papers to a stunned Gabriella. Said it was the only way he knew to make amends. Harold Winters died peacefully in his sleep that night. Gabriella mourned not just the father she had lost, but the relationship they might have had if pride and prejudice hadn't stood between them. The funeral was well attended, Copper Ridge's citizens turning out to pay respects to one of the territory's most influential men. Gabriella stood between Joaquin and Dakota, drawing strength from their presence as she accepted condolences from people who had once shunned her for her choice of husband. In the days that followed, Gabriella and Joaquin faced a difficult decision. The Winters' holdings were substantial: cattle, land, mining interests, investments. Managing them would require remaining in Colorado, abandoning the life they had begun to build in New Mexico. "We could sell everything," Joaquin suggested as they discussed their options in Harold's study. "Use the money to expand our place on the Double R." Gabriella traced her fingers over her father's desk, remembering how imposing he had seemed behind it. "Or we could stay. Change things. Make the Winters' name stand for something better than my father did." Dakota and Diana, who had delayed their return to support their friends, offered a third perspective. "Why choose?" Dakota asked. "Keep both. Build something here that connects the territories. A horse breeding operation in Colorado linked to the one in New Mexico." Diana nodded. "With regular stagecoach and railroad lines now, you could travel between them. Spend summers here, winters there." The idea took root and flourished. Over the next year, Gabriella and Joaquin transformed the Winters ranch into a showcase for Joaquin's carefully bred horses, while maintaining their connection to the Double R. Their reputation for quality stock spread throughout the West, attracting buyers from as far away as Kentucky and California. Dakota completed his house in New Mexico, a sturdy 2-story structure with a wide porch and plenty of room. To no one's surprise, Diana eventually stopped pretending she was just passing through, and moved in permanently. Their wedding the following spring was a joyous affair, with Daniel Reed officiating and Gabriella and Joaquin standing up for them as they had done at their own ceremony. 5 years after her desperate escape from her father's cellar, Gabriella sat on the porch of the New Mexico home they now occupied for half the year, watching her 3-year-old daughter, Elena, chase butterflies in the garden. Joaquin worked nearby, gentling a spirited colt with the patience and skill that had made him renowned throughout the territories. Dakota and Diana's place was visible just over the rise, smoke curling from the chimney despite the warm evening. Their twin boys, now 2, were frequent visitors, toddling over with their parents for dinner several times a week. "Penny for your thoughts," Joaquin said, coming to sit beside her after turning the colt out to pasture. Gabriella smiled, taking his hand. "I was thinking about the cellar. About how being imprisoned there felt like the end of everything, when it was really the beginning. If your father hadn't locked you away, Dakota wouldn't have found you," Joaquin agreed. "And we might never have found our way here. Do you ever regret it? All the danger, the uncertainty, the years of building something from nothing?" Joaquin lifted her hand to his lips. "Not for a single moment. Every hardship led us here, to this life, to our family. How could I regret that?" From across the property came the sound of hoofbeats. Dakota and Diana appeared on horseback, their boys secured in front of them in special saddles Dakota had designed. Behind them rode Daniel Reed with his wife and their young daughter. "Company for dinner," Gabriella observed, rising to greet them. As the families gathered on the porch, sharing news and laughter in the golden light of sunset, Gabriella felt a profound sense of rightness. The path that had brought them here had been dangerous and uncertain, fraught with risk and sacrifice. But standing among these people who had become more than friends, who had become family, she knew it had been worth every step. Dakota caught her eye across the porch and raised his glass in a silent toast. They both understood what had been gained and lost along the way. They both knew the value of freedom, of love, of finding home not in a place but in the people who stand beside you through the darkest nights. And as the children played and the adults talked late into the evening, Gabriella thanked whatever fate or providence had sent Dakota Reed to her cellar window on that desperate night so long ago, the night when a locked door had opened onto a future brighter than she had ever dared to imagine.